Have you ever heard of the Batman trilogy or the Star Wars trilogy? This is the Wayne Carter trilogy. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to continue where we left off.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of equate, at least to me, as the practice of law. You know, you think a case is closed. Well, no. Even in a criminal case, if you go through a jury trial and say there's a guilty verdict, well, then you're obligated to appeal it. You know, and then that could take on for years. So yeah.
Yeah. How do attorneys do that when they say they're 60 and they say, you know, I'm thinking about retiring next year, and a good case comes in, or a case you feel obligated on, it'll be 3 months before you do depositions and summary judgments, and next thing you know, you're 65. Can they just quit and hand it off to somebody?
When I left private practice and came to the DA's office, that was in '86, I'd been in private practice for 4 years, and because I had a pretty good, client base, and you didn't know. I had to hand these off to other lawyers, and then if something's coming up, I had to go. It was probably 2.5, 3 years before I actually got out of the private practice.
Because you had things. And how does the client deal with that? We say, hey, listen, I'm retiring, but I'm gonna hand you over to Fred.
Yeah, well, you just gotta, in our profession, you've got to obviously communicate with them, and let them know. And if they don't want Fred to have it, then give them some other options. And in our profession, I was talking about this the other day with somebody. The biggest problem that we have in malpractice is failure to communicate. Lawyers don't do that very well. And I know what it was. I've got a couple of cases now I'm handling in criminal court. One of them's in McMinn County, one of them's in Monroe County. And I was explaining to the judge, I said, look, I've got to spend some time on the road because I feel like I need to go see these clients. They're both in jail. So I've got to go spend time with them. So I'm going to be having to do this. And
so you're still working?
A little bit.
I mean, we're talking about retirement and when you retired, and now you're talking about still working.
Yeah, but not as much as I did.
What's the difference?
Well, one is I'm really able to spend a lot more time with these people that I represent, and I think it makes them feel like I'm representing them better, and whether I was or not, and it probably does. I listen to their story and I get to know them better, and that kind of stuff. And on the other hand, I don't have to go to the office every day. I spent a day and a half last week working. The rest of it I was getting my Sunday school, thinking about talking to you today.
Well, but when you're in private practice, you feel like you got to hurry and look under rocks for jobs, or...
Well, you're making a living.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate now to retire from the Army and retire from the DA's office. I've got an okay retirement.
Whenever you read a story in the newspaper or see something on television about somebody getting arrested, you naturally assume they're guilty. Unless the story's about you or someone you love, then you'll think differently. And you'll want a lawyer who will defend you. My name's Scott Canavis. If you or someone you love has been charged with a crime, call me. I'll return your phone calls, I'll work on your case, and I will defend you.
Did you try to have everything paid off before you retired, or did you?
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad I did. That was the best thing I did economically, because we have a lot of. My wife, I don't know, but she's a lot of medical issues, and so even though we got good insurance, there's stuff you got to pay for. And so we live good, but we're not extravagant, and a lot of the money that we have to goes to medical stuff.
So you couldn't have paid off a lot of other stuff, I guess, right?
It's just better to not have that obligation. I had a couple 401ks, and I took some of that, paid off the house, and so I don't have any debt.
When you do that, do you have to pay taxes on it?
Yeah.
But you opted to just say, hey, I want to get this debt off of me?
Exactly.
You could have waited, maybe paid less taxes.
Then I've been worried every month. I don't really worry month to month. So, and if I want to go out to eat with the kids, it's not a big deal, And people that got money, maybe they got that, but folks like me, that's middle America, that's a big deal. Be able to have the comfort of taking your kids out to dinner when you want to.
And not having a payment that you can make, but you say, well, what if, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, there's so many things to consider. And then if you were in a business that your kids were taking over, that'd be a whole nother ballgame, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
You wouldn't, I mean, how many people can say, I'm going to pay off all my debt? Probably. At 65, probably.
Yeah,
30% of them?
I don't
maybe,
know. I wonder, kind of wandering in here, but I wonder sometimes, and you may know more about this than I do, but you drive out in the community, in the county, and you see these very expensive looking houses, and a lot of them. Are that many people making that kind of money?
Well, I've even thought of it further. Who's paying them? If they are, what are they doing? I'm not paying them. You're not paying them.
Yeah.
DA's office isn't paying all those people. County courthouse isn't paying them. Whirlpool, are they paying them?
I don't know.
Are they all working at Walker?
Yeah, but are those guys making that kind of money? Because I made a pretty good living. I never felt like I guess I could have gone into debt up to my ear, but I just never wanted to do that.
But I think that is the way to make money, is to go in debt if you wanted to really leverage your way up.
Yeah, I think if you're, I'm not an economist, but it seemed like to me if the guy that's got a lot of money can afford to do that. But somebody like me down here, if I got into debt and if I lost, I'm going to go talk to Richard Banks.
Yeah, right. I bet he knows the answer to these things. I bet he'd really, I bet he would know the answer to that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because it's, and maybe all of that stuff is, the banks are the ones that are most leveraged. And the insurance companies, that's the people that are leveraged. Yeah. So leverage in itself can't be wrong.
I know, but was it back during the Bush administration when all those banks and stuff were about to go under because they didn't do a very good job of that? So I don't know.
It didn't work.
I've never had that kind of courage to want to think if things go south, I'm broke.
Yeah, that wasn't how we were raised.
Yeah, no.
The fear, the fear. Did you spend you spent a lot of time in Alabama, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
Did you live there or travel there?
Just travel there.
Were Huntsville?
Huntsville, I was in a unit in Birmingham and then at separate times in Huntsville, and then I went back to Birmingham, yeah.
So you'd just stay in Cleveland or stay in?
Yeah, it was pretty much just a weekend. We'd go down there and a couple of us, 2 or 3 of us would come in and we might go to a hotel and share a room. It wasn't that expensive.
Yeah. But I mean, you were doing that for the Army, right?
Right. Yeah.
What was your role there then?
Well, several roles over the years. I mean, you don't stay in there's Army 34 years and don't have a number of different roles. But I was a captain when I went to Birmingham the first time. And it was the 87th Division, and what the 87th did, our mission in life was to train brigade level staffs, it's kind of higher level Army staffs, really throughout the southeast United States and Puerto Rico. And so to train a staff, it's generally about a 12-month commitment to training. And so we would go in and observe a lot of what the unit was doing that we're training, and then we would develop a military exercise and put them through this exercise and watch them and see how they reacted and those kinds. So the first part of it, I was one of the people that would go in and observe and watch other staffs and put together an military exercise. And to really get to know the staff, you have to go in and work with them for about a year.
So were you testing them for war times?
Yeah, oh yeah, always wartime. Yeah.
'Cause that's the main reason of the Army, right? I mean,
Right.
It's not another reason.
Yeah. So it was a great. I enjoyed it. I didn't. I tell you how I got in that unit. It's kind of interesting because I was in Desert Shield, Desert Storm in the National Guard unit. Came back and was at a firing range, firing my M16, firing my 45 over in Tullahoma, and the unit that I was in was fixing to be involved in one of these major exercises that I just described to you. And so the guy that came to observe us and meet us and talk to us was a guy from Cleveland, Tennessee.
What are the odds?
Yeah. And so we got to talking, and you might have known him, Lynn Harper, William Linton Harper.
I've heard that name.
He was worked at M&M Mars as a civilian, but he was in this unit in Birmingham. Was just happened to, and so we got to talking, and he said, "Man, you could make major in the unit I'm in now." He said, "You might want to consider, but for your background, we could really use you." So he kind of recruited me to go to Birmingham, and probably one of the best military moves I ever made, because in like a month I was promoted to major, and did those functions. We did one exercise we did was in Puerto Rico, which was a great thing to do. We'd fly over on a Friday and do our stuff and come back on a Sunday evening. It was a interesting.
You flew back?
Yeah.
So they were like real weekend trips, right?
Oh, so some of them were, yeah. Particularly when we did like Puerto Rico. I did an exercise in Mobile, Alabama once. It was a long way to go back down and forth, and so yeah.
Would you leave on like Friday morning or?
No, just as soon as I could get out of court on Friday afternoons.
Boy, that was busy times,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
Yeah.
You had to be packed.
Oh yeah. We always had a couple bags packed in the garage. One for a weekend if you're going to go to like a regular drill, like I just described.
Yeah.
Or if you get called up for the real deal, you better have all your combat gear packed.
So you had either or.
Yeah.
So if you're in the reserves, people really had their war stuff packed, ready to go in case.
Absolutely.
We us civilians don't think much about it, but it could have been real serious, right?
Well, if you kind of flipping and going back and forth, but when Desert Storm happened, Desert Shield was the build-up to Desert Storm. We actually started building up in Saudi Arabia probably in July or August of 1990. And if you remember, the ground war was in February or March of 1991, but so most of that time was building up.
Yeah.
Well, I was in the Tennessee National Guard unit at that time, and we were at Camp Shelby, Mississippi, doing our 2-week encampment. And we were doing war games, what we did. And we were attached to the 7th Corps, which is in Europe, and we'd go over there a lot to do exercises, but their guy came over to observe us, and I'll never forget standing up briefing this guy in a big tent, and we're briefing this guy about this war that we're simulated war that we're going through. You know, we took it pretty serious. And he gets a message. And I'm standing there, and he's as, you know, probably as close as you and I, as I'm standing in front of a map, explaining the war to him, and he's sitting there, and some of his aides comes in and gives him a message. And he stops me in the middle of my briefing, and I think, oh man, I was really messed up. He's fixing to chew me out big time, which wasn't unusual, but, and he says, I never forget, his language was, my RAOC's going to Saudi Arabia. And it took me a minute. We were the Rear Area Operations Center. That's who we were. And it took me just a bit of a time to realize he's talking about us. we're his RAOC. We're fixing to go to Saudi Arabia. And so within probably 2 days, we're out of Camp Shelby, gone up to Fort Campbell, where they're fitting us and getting us ready to go to the desert. And then 2 or 3 days later, we're on a C-5 going to Saudi Arabia. We get to Saudi Arabia in August.
Now, how old are you at this point?
1990. I was born in 54.
36?
Yeah, 36.
So you were up until that point, did you sort of think, this is just all, I mean that made it real when you're riding on the boat and the water's hitting you
We're
in
in
the
the boat.
face?
It's a big C-5's an airplane.
Oh.
Biggest carrier there is. No, because I had enlisted in 1973 during the Vietnam era. And I spent 6 years active duty. I enlisted in the Air Force in 1973 and spent 4 years in the Air Force, and I transferred into the Army and spent a couple years in that. So, no, you always knew it's a possibility, but, you know, when Vietnam ended, we were all pretty much at peace around the world, we thought.
Yeah, for forever.
Yeah.
Theoretically.
And I never will forget the month or so before we got activated, we were at a drill weekend, and I was telling the guys that was working for me, I said, well, you know, reading in the news, there's something going on in a place called Kuwait. I said, I never heard of that. Where is it?
Q8.
You know, we looked on the map, and it's down here, and we were always in Europe. We were 7th Corps in Europe. I said, well, there ain't no way they're going to send us down there. We're used to this fighting the Russians over in Europe. We're not on anything about the desert. Mm-hmm. And, of course, we're the first unit activated, so we're on our way over. I looked at my guys and said, God, don't ever listen to me again.
How many of you were on the plane?
Probably had maybe 120, 150 of us.
All in your... Yeah. What'd you call it? Unit?
Well, we were what's called a Rear Area Operations Center. It was a neat job to have, and if you can visualize, if you can visualize, this is the front line of the battlefield, and on this side is the bad guy, on this side is us. Mm-hmm. And that's where you always, you know, everything happens as far as the battle that you see. Behind the bad guys, is what we would call the deep battlefield. Their battle. There's the logistics, their gas, their beams, their bullets is coming from somewhere to support these guys on the front. Well, we got the same thing over here. Rather than call it our deep battle, we call it the rear area operation. And so you got everything coming in, food, bullets, gas, more people, medical, anything that will support them is coming in. And our job was to organize and make sure those guys are secure and have routes to get up to the main line. So everything, I might have mentioned to you before that for every frontline soldier, between 7 and 11 people are supporting him.
Golly, that's different than the Roman Empire, wasn't it?
Not really.
Did they have that sort of thing too?
You know, the biggest thing that the Romans left us in history?
What?
The Roman roads. All roads lead to Rome. You think you've heard that saying. And that was because of that, because they built roads and stuff so they could support their military just for that same reason. Wonder
which one came up with that of their military people. Wouldn't be Alexander the Great, because he just took advantage of what had already been started, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, but it became more and more, if you read a little bit about at least Mideastern history, we read all this stuff in the Old Testament. And every now and then you'll hear something called the King's Highway. Mm-hmm. Well, that was the King's Highway, was the Roman road that would take from north to south. Jerusalem,
was it the same road?
Yeah. And Jerusalem really was not a significant military place. All the fighting was going on between what would be up in like Mesopotamia and Egypt. Israel just happened to be in the middle of it, and they were off the road. They weren't that significant, except they just happened to be on the King's Highway.
And that area right now is where?
The Gaza Strip and all that. Yeah.
We're back to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But was that the road, the Roman road too?
Yeah, they were all over the empire. I mean, all over Europe.
So the Roman road was built all the way to the Gaza
Well, there were
Strip.
many roads, kind of like our interstate system. Yeah.
They built them out of bricks, I guess. I don't know how that is.
Well, as it got better, I'd say they did, but whatever it took to get a chariot down the road.
Now these guys here, what's the odds they're going to die? Pretty good.
Well, there's people that do those kind of things, but if you remember Desert Storm, I don't think we lost but one or two guys.
Yeah, this other side was kind of surrendering, weren't they?
Well, they were, and what had happened was, it was a good show of our superior intelligence. We had intelligence of what was going on behind the lines, the satellite imagery that we could see what was going on, picking up their communications. A lot of information we got came from the ships that were out there in the Persian Gulf that was listening in to what the communication was. And so all that stuff prepared it. And then if you remember, there was like a week or two of air bombardment, artillery from the ships just bombing the crap out of them. And so when we finally let loose of the tanks, they were pretty much willing to give up.
Scud missiles, remember that? Was that what they said on the news every night? They'd show them.
Well, Scuds is what they have. That's what
was it we had that intercepted?
Patriots.
Patriots, yeah. That's what it was, the Patriot missile.
The Scuds are developed by the Russians. Patriots developed by, and both sides are making money out of this side,
It's all
Yeah.
when you get well down deep in the weeds, right?
Oh, you think about the United States economy, it's a military economy. I mean, from 1774 to the present, we've been fighting somebody.
Most other people have been fighting. People just fight, don't they?
It seems
Have you
like-
ever read the book, Why We Fight? It talks about why we fight is due to religion. That it's all because of religion.
Yeah, and it's generally, and I have my personal opinion, and you get my opinion, but I think generally the soldiers down here are pretty much following orders, doing what they're told to do. It's the politicians that get us into war.
It's not these 7 support people.
Right.
They're just
Yeah.
they were just born in that group.
Yeah.
I guess if they were born in this group.
Yeah. I never will forget back in I guess it was the early to mid 80s. Like I said, I was in Germany a lot and with the Army in and out a week or two at a time. And we got to go into this one particular restaurant. If we had some off time, we'd go eat. And I was over 2 or 3 times a year, so I kind of got to know the guy. The guy that owned the place was a World War II veteran. He was a Nazi. He was on the other side. And so we get to talking, and he was just, I'll never forget, he said, we were just doing what we were told. We were our country drafted us and said to do just like your country tells you you're doing. So I really think about that every now and then when I think about, okay, we want to go down and annihilate somebody. These guys down here are just like us.
But they have to get these people motivated by however way they can. You got to get them motivated.
Oh, you know, we told the World War II guys about the Japanese, and if you get captured by them, well, they'll torture and eat you, and
Just to get your adrenaline up.
yeah, and just to scare you to death, you know. And
It's like if I'm riding a bike and we're riding, going pretty hard, but if a dog comes out, everybody can take off.
Yeah.
Because you're afraid you're going to get bit by the
Yeah.
dog. And it's really not even going to chase you, but you just, oh, there's a dog.
and what you know what the Germans did, I mean, awful. I mean, what the Nazis did, and you know the Holocaust, and I mean that's terrible, and they should be punished for those kind of things. But the average soldier on the front line wasn't the guy who was doing that, and it was
The average combatant.
Yeah, that's my view.
Now, when you first got to Desert Storm, what was that like? Did they have a tent or a building, or did you put up a, you know, like on TV, you put on a pup tent and two people?
Well, it's interesting that what I remember when we were descending to land, I could just feel the temperature rising, and we stepped off that plane, and it is hot.
Was it like Arizona hot or hot?
It's hot. And it may be like, I don't know. I've been to Arizona. I've hiked the Grand Canyon, but I don't remember so much dust in the air in Arizona. It was just
no
dust all the time, and it's hot. And so we flew in and got into Riyadh, and they kept us in Riyadh for a couple of days, I think, just to figure out where they wanted us to go. And so those 2 or 3 days, we were actually staying in a parking garage. We were on concrete, staying on a parking garage. Because they ain't got no place to put us. And
so you're sleeping in your sleeping bag?
Well, no, it's hot. We're sleeping on a cot. They got a cot for us, which was okay. But it was nasty.
But you had open air.
Yeah. It was like a parking garage at a hospital. And so they sent us to Dhahran, is where we ended up, because in Dhahran, if you're familiar with that part of the world, but Dhahran is on the Persian Gulf side of Saudi Arabia. At that time, and it may still be, the largest seaport in the world. And so everything that we were bringing in for the war effort pretty much come through the seaport in Dhahran. And what it was, the 7th Corps up in Europe got that mission to go and be the main thrust of the Army down there. And that's why we get at, because we're part of 7th Corps. And so we go there to get all this stuff that's coming off these boats and planes or do our job, you know, the land management pretty much is what it was. And so there we're living in we call tent cities, huge tents we're setting up, and I'll never forget the first morning I woke up in there, and I'm sitting on the side of my cot, and they got a little rug to put on the ground, so you don't put it, you're not on the sand.
Everybody got a little rug?
Yeah, and I'm sitting there. The only thing I got on my boxer underwear. I'm just sitting there like this, and I am sweating profusely. I ain't done anything yet, and I'm sweating.
And it was first thing in the morning.
Yeah, and so the best thing you could do was get out of the tent, because being in the tent was like being in an oven. And
you can't sleep like that, can you?
And so fortunately, our job was land management, so we had to get out and move around and find places to put stuff and deconflict things, and so we had for a military, we had a really good, I thought it was a good job, because I at least didn't have to sit there, because most everybody we're bringing off these ships and boats and planes, we're finding a place for them, and they're just there. What is it? Churchill, I think, said that war was 99% boredom, 1% pure terror. And I think that's right, because you're just waiting. Most
Hurry up
everybody's
and wait.
waiting. And at least we had a job where we were getting out to do something. And I never will forget, so you're getting all these off the boat, and you're just putting them somewhere, and you got to figure out, we ended up having a MASH unit in military, a mobile hospital, that ended up being by a fuel depot. Well, that's a violation of the Geneva Convention because the fuel depot is a legitimate target for the enemy. A hospital are not supposed to target. So if you put a hospital by a fuel
You're not
depot,
playing fair.
you're not playing. It's kind of what the bad guys do it.
Yeah.
You know, we intermingle, the bad guys intermingle with civilians, and you know, you hear about that all the time in the Mideast. Well, we're not supposed to. We're the guys with the white hat on. We're not supposed to. And it's a part of what we were doing, deconflict stuff like that.
Like move the mass unit away from the gas station
Exactly.
so they can.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the deal, and so it was a lot of stuff going on for us. And I look back at it, and I'm thankful that we did, because I would have been bored to death if I just had to sit there and wait.
You could have become an alcoholic or something, just sitting there
well,
waiting.
We couldn't get alcohol in there, but yeah.
They didn't have any.
Supposedly on the turf, the geography is called Saudi Arabia. It's holy ground, and they don't allow you to drink on their holy ground. Matter of fact, a lot of them religious leaders didn't really want us there because we were Caucasians. That was part of the issue we had in the rear, was not only with the bad guys trying to get to us, but some of the homegrown religious leaders, the real Orthodox Islam guys, you know, would have the possibility of trying to infiltrate and shoot up stuff, and so we had to have security around everybody.
Were you ever in the intelligence division?
We had intelligence part of it, but I never was specifically that. And my background in the Army was a nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare and infantry.
What's a long word, isn't it?
Well, it's in the Air Force. I know we're jumping around, but when I enlisted in 1973, I enlisted because I didn't want to get drafted. And I thought I have some kind of choice about what I do. And I went in the Air Force, and I didn't really have a job assigned. And so they give you these battery of tests to determine what they want you to do, what your job's going to be. And I never will forget, toward the end of basic training, they come out and tell you where you're going to go to school to learn what the military wants you to learn. And they come and said, Carter, you're going to be an air traffic controller. What's that? I had no clue what that was. I really thought, with my dad's background in construction, that they'd send me into engineers, because I've done all that stuff when I was a kid, but that wouldn't.
Was it a long test?
There was several tests, I think more than one.
So it was like an aptitude test,
Yeah.
like they're using. I wonder if they ever can really get that right. You know, because you don't know how you can answer questions. Your biases are just, my cognitive biases. I just see the world one way, and
Well, apparently, and I didn't really try that hard in high school, but apparently the aptitude test that the Air Force gave me, and the Army later on, said that I had an aptitude for math. And because being an air traffic controller was important to have that,
sure.
and being in the nuclear, biological, and chemical core, a lot of physics and chemistry involved in that, and I'd done it, but I just never thought about it. But I did okay with that.
But you didn't enjoy math, right?
No, it wasn't my, I just did it because.
Maybe what we're good at is not necessarily what we want to do.
It may be. It was for me. Yeah. But yeah, I had a great job in the Air Force. An air traffic controller for an enlisted soldier or enlisted airman. It's a good job.
Oh, it'd be a gravy job, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And then you get out and could really get a good job.
Well, I turned down a job with the FAA to go to law school.
Why'd you switch from the Air Force to the Army?
Well, it was another fortunate thing that a person I met. I had been an air traffic controller. They could only work you so many hours a week because of the FAA regulations. Not like any other job in the military, they can work you all they want, but they were, because of the FAA, you had X amount of hours you could work. I had a lot of off time. So I went to college on my off time, and I got my undergraduate degree done while I was in the Air Force. And it just so happened it was a Methodist University over in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And it just so happened they had just started an ROTC program. I had no interest in it, I thought. Got talking to the cadre, the people that taught the ROTC at the college, Captain Glenn Blackburn, never forget him, and he became my friend. And he taught me, he said, Wayne, come on and take another semester in ROTC. You can get commissioned in the Army. And, you know, if you like it, fine. If you don't, you can stay in the reserves or whatnot. I thought, well, you know, that's not a bad idea. I can stay in the reserves, and all of a sudden I go from an enlisted soldier to an officer, which the pay grade's a lot better, and living style's a little better, particularly when I made major later on, living pretty good. So, Glenn Blackburn, Captain Blackburn, had taught me into doing that,
And that's not the one from Cleveland, is it? There's a Blackburn here.
No, it's a different set of dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know Sergeant Major, or he's deceased now.
His son's not, right?
No, his son's not, but Sergeant Major,
Yeah.
the Armory is named after him out here.
I believe that's right.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that. But
Yeah.
well, he was there. I know his son. He's a great guy.
Yeah, I knew his son.
Alan. Is it Alan?
Yeah, it's Alan, because Alan's wife, I don't know if she's still working on, but she worked in the clerk's office here.
That's Johnny Burris' daughter. You know Johnny Burr?
No, I mean, I know the name, but I don't.
Yeah, that's Johnny Burris' daughter.
Okay.
Great
I knew
guy.
her, and then Alan would come in and every now and then to have lunch or something with her, and I got to know Alan. Then because I knew Sergeant Major Blackburn.
Well, it's a small world, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. But that was I wish that I could say that I had planned this stuff out, but I don't think I planned a whole lot. I think.
Were you trying to plan? Because I try to plan, but it don't seem to work. Life gets in the way.
And I've been blessed, lucky, whatever you want to call it, because like meeting Captain Blackburn at Methodist University. Had I not met him, I'd have gotten out of the Air Force and, you know, gone to law school and never stayed in the Army and never done all this stuff.
No.
And
Just a chance encounter, actually.
yeah. Well, it was at the student center. I was sitting there. I think I was in uniform because I'd gotten off work and had to go to class. And I think I was having a hamburger or something. He just come up, started talking to me because I was, you know. And that.
No other reason for him to approach you.
Yeah.
He hadn't had the uniform on.
Yeah.
It could even go back as far as, why'd you choose to wear that day?
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah.
We never know,
Yeah.
do we?
Well, and like Lynn Harper here in Cleveland, I never met him until I was on the firing range in Middle Tennessee, and he's over here fixing to be involved in an exercise, observing us, and I just happened to, on the firing range, I met this guy.
And never thought you'd be in Cleveland. You probably hadn't even heard of Cleveland.
Oh, I was in Cleveland then. I was in the DA's office then. But
But you didn't know he was.
I didn't know him. Didn't know him from Adam.
What are the odds of that?
Yeah. Become one of my best, and Lynn died, I think, last year. He retired from M&M Mars, retired from the Army.
I bet you if somebody sat down and really looked into coincidences, it would be, it's almost so common that it's not a coincidence.
Yeah,
You ever think about that?
Well, I'm going to tell you what you've done for me.
What's
You
that?
made me think about some of this stuff I hadn't thought about, to be honest with you.
I'll do that.
And I have taken your advice on one thing.
What's that?
I've started to write a book.
Well, you should write a book.
It was talking about coincidences. You had mentioned that to me last time we talked. And there's a young lady that's been coming to my Sunday school class since back before Christmas. Really never talked to her a whole lot. She just came to the class. We got 15 or 20 people in that class, and just, you know, I know her from class, but just happened. Well, one Sunday after you and I talked, she ends up sitting beside me in the worship service. actually, my grandson's by me. She's beside my grandson, and my daughter's over here. There's a whole crowd of us. Well, at the end of the service, we get to talking. I never, like I said, never get it. She had just graduated from Lee University back in December, an English literature major. And I sort of bounced this idea, and I told her about your and I's conversation, and she said, well, that's kind of what I want to do. And so I'm her first client. I'm her first project.
Well, I had Jerry Puckett on the show. You know Jerry Puckett? He prints them. So if you ever want anybody, you got to use him.
Well, that's what she told me. She said, we can write this thing. And matter of fact, she's met with me and interviewed me twice, and she's sent me some drafts. And she said, this is going to take a while.
Sure.
But she said, but I don't know about anything about publishing or putting it together.
Oh, Jerry will do that, and he loves it. I've never met a person that was so passionate about his job.
Well,
he is passionate about putting books together. And I mean the print. It's not writing it. He wants to print it. He wants to write paper, the numbering, the fonts.
Well, like you suggested to me, and I've thought about it, I'm really doing this for my kids and grandkids.
That's the
If
reason.
ain't nobody else read that, it's fine, you know.
That's very important. Everybody, they used to do that years ago. They had people kept their, girls kept their diary.
Yeah.
And then.
She asked me if I had a diary as a
What about memoirs?
What's the difference?
What's the difference, Gwen, between a memoir?
Memoir is more of a journal and a less personal.
I think a memoir is a man's diary. Probably.
Yeah. But anyway, we started that. We haven't, she's interviewed me. She sent me not even the first chapter, but I guess first part of the first chapter. She sent me, says, look at this and let's take changes and so.
What would you call her, the writer, or would you call her I don't know what that role would be, do you?
No, but I hope I want to give her credit, because I'm going to tell you what, she makes my dry writing sound pretty nice. I mean,
There's an art to that, isn't
she's
there?
good. I've enjoyed what little I've read of hers so far.
And they have to write to the audience or to the, you got to either write it, dumb it down, or intelligence it up, or slow it down. Or there's a real skill to that.
Yeah.
I don't have it.
But we tend to do this, and I think that's one reason I've enjoyed meeting you guys.
I bounce around.
As we just kind of take off on little rabbit trails. But after I got in the Army, I spent about a year and a half active duty doing all training stuff, and I get out, and another chance meeting is interesting. I think about this. I have just gotten out of regular Army, and I've spent 4 years in the Air Force. I've been in Tubing, and I've got an obligation to be in a reserve unit for 4 years. I hadn't really done anything. I'd just been out for about a month. I go to a fish fry over in Lebanon, Tennessee, where I was living, and I met a guy named Carl Wallace. Do you remember Carl Wallace?
Nope.
He was the adjutant general for the state of Tennessee at that time. Ran for governor once, years ago.
The Wallace campaign, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. But anyway, I met him, and just he talked me into. He said, "Well, you got 4 years. Don't you get in the Guard unit? I can get you into one locally, and you ain't got far to go, and you can do your time, and if you want to stay, you can do. If you're not," and I thought, well, I got to do that, and it's a little extra money on weekends. I was just, starting to, in law school, and all that stuff going on, and I said, well, yeah, I'll do that. And he's the guy that talked me into getting into the Tennessee Army National Guard. Major General Carl Wallace. Met him at a fish fry.
Who could figure?
Yeah. And so, that happened, and like I said, we went to, I ended up I was platoon leader in a unit in Nashville. I ended up being a detachment commander in a unit in Murfreesboro. And then I went to this RAOC, which is in Smyrna, and all those pretty close together, and that's where I grew up. And in the meantime, had moved to Cleveland. And after the desert thing, I went to Birmingham with the 87th Division with the training unit. One of the good things that the Army does, I think, is if you're willing to put a little effort into it, they will train you what they want you to do. And so if you're going to get promoted in the Army, you've got to be educated. You can't just stay where you are. You're going to have to either get educated and promoted, or you're going to have to get out at some point. And so one of the things that we were required to do if I was going to get promoted was go to it was actually a 2-year deal, Command and General Staff College. And it actually equates to a master's in business management. And Command and General Staff College really is what teaches you how all this stuff in the back works. Mm-hmm. And you just don't know it. And because when you're a young lieutenant, you're out here on the front line, and you don't know any of this stuff's happening. You just know somebody's getting you beans and bullets. But you get started at Command and General Staff College, you start saying, well, this stuff's got to be built somewhere in the United States. They got to ship it over here. We got to unload it. We got to transport it from point A to point B. And I mean, it's a big deal. Yeah. And so you see that, at least I did, with Army Command and General Staff College.
And somebody's got to write a check somewhere.
Well, that's your taxpayers.
But somebody's still got to.
Yeah.
What department would that be in the Army or military?
What?
To write the check. Surely they got a budget probably for Air Force, Navy.
Controls.
So that's
budget
all. That's
stuff.
where all the checks are written, I guess, right?
Yes, sort of. Yeah.
Boy, it's a complex web.
Oh, it is, and that's just the Army part.
Yeah, we didn't
think
talk
about the Navy and the Air Force, and the Marines is actually part of the Navy.
So they're not part of are the Marines part of the Army?
No, they're actually part of the Department of Navy.
I thought they would have been on. I thought they were your stronger Army guys. Basically.
Well, their missions supposedly is a little bit different. They have a lot. They do have the same mission as the Army, but what the Marines kind of do is they will get in there, and they were supposed to hold on until we can get everybody else there. And the Army comes in there. We're gonna be there. We're not just gonna hold on. We're gonna build up.
So the Marines are the first ones in.
If you supposedly. But then you got all these special forces guys that do a lot of other stuff. They'll operate back in behind the deep battle behind.
But that's special forces.
Yeah, but you got Army special forces, you got Navy special forces, the Air Force.
What about the Green Beret?
Well, that's part of the Army. Yeah.
What about the Navy SEALs?
That's part of the Navy.
just different jobs.
Yeah, and they're different missions, and they all intertwingle sometimes, and it's confusing because
there's not one that's tougher than the other necessarily.
No, they're all, yeah. It's a lot more easier to understand if you've got a traditional battlefield.
Right, but that's not always the case,
we ain't
right?
had a traditional. Well, the only one we've had since World War II, I think, was probably Korea and Desert Storm. Vietnam was never a traditional battlefield. You never had a line here, but good guys over here and bad guys over there. All this stuff in the Mideast is which we're policing areas. We're not.
Korea was just a police.
Yeah, but at least you had a line. You had what was that parallel, whatever that was?
Yeah. Only thing we know about Korea is MASH.
Right. Yeah.
Well, it was a good show, wasn't it?
It was.
You think that was pretty true?
Yeah.
I'd say that was the life.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about, I know this is really off the subject, but during the Patriotic War, they were coming down, America won because we could hide behind trees, and they were doing the standard.
Yeah. Yeah.
and they were far away. I guess they didn't have a logistics backs up like we could have had here. But wasn't that something for us to have held them off and not have had time to really get organized? That was a pretty...
Well, you know, that's a whole different ballgame, because one thing, we're so used to mass communication, quick communication, even quick logistics. You know,
Yeah.
we like that C5 we were, you know, in country from Fort Campbell, you know, in a few hours. I mean, it didn't happen in 1775.
You can get the horses
You
saddled
got
up
an
that
ocean
length of
between
time.
us
Yeah.
and most everybody in Europe could care less what was happening over here, because they got their own little battles going on, and they don't know what's going on over here. If France hadn't hated England so much, we'd have probably gotten whooped, because France gave us all the naval support we needed.
There's a lot of things
Yeah.
going to play. Oh, we got the other thing. Don't they have the Space Force now, which is a whole nother division?
Yeah, you know, and that's established since I retired, and I don't know if they're part of the Air Force or they're separate, you know, but
Yeah, or if it's just a whole nother
yeah,
branch.
yeah. But you think about like Desert Storm, because I was in the Army part of it. The general that was over the entire Army part was the U.S. Army, was a guy named Yosak, General Yosak. And most people never heard of him.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was another general that was over the Air Force part. There was another admiral over the Navy part. And Schwarzkopf was over all of it. And he's the guy you heard about.
Yeah, there's a guy on Fox News.
Yeah, yeah. But it was Yosak's guys that planned the ground war, which worked pretty well.
Yeah.
Of course, it was the Air Force guys that took out all their eyes and ears from the bad guys. So,
It didn't take long. It was an easy thing, wasn't it?
yeah, yeah.
You know, the future of military may be just with drones. Your drone against my drone.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think you need to do now is be able to play a video game.
You know, I went outside the other night to let the dog out, and I looked up, and I don't know if I was seeing things or what, but I saw about what I thought was 6 drones. They weren't flying like helicopters. They weren't flying like planes. They had 2 red lights and a white light in the middle, and they were all, and they'd go like this. It had to have been just, I wonder if there's a lot of hobby dronists out there.
I'd say they are. I know my wife's got a nephew, lives over in Athens, and he's got a drone. It's not but it's got a camera on it, and I'd say yeah. Well, wasn't it a few months ago we had something up in New Hampshire, New Jersey?
Yeah, they never have really told us what
Yeah.
that was about.
Yeah,
Just nothing to fear. I believe it was what I'm talking about, just drones.
Yeah.
But boy, that's going to be a whole nother world, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah. I think you're still going to have ground troops, but it's most of it's going to be just like you said. It's going to be somebody.
Well, I mean,
sitting back and,
even if you had drones, when you take over, what are you going to do? You got to send somebody in. What's the point of doing it if you're? I don't think me and you have a clue what's next. It's going to be so outrageous.
yeah. Because occupying property is what we used to consider a win in the military, but I don't know that that's necessarily true anymore.
It's almost a liability.
Yeah, yeah,
It's become that way now.
yeah.
You know, the wars against the landowner, insurance, taxes.
But if you think about it, I guess it was the Spanish-American War. There was the idea at that point politically of the United States going ahead and taking over Mexico. And one of the arguments was that, well, if we take it over, one, how are we going to control it? Mm-hmm. You got a whole other population of people down there and, almost a welfare state. We got to protect them, feed them, clothe them, and all this kind of stuff. And I guess we got talked out of doing it.
That was Davy Crockett, wasn't it?
No, it was
Or Daniel
after.
Boone.
That was
New Jackson.
Andrew Jackson.
Well, Jackson would have been right after Andrew Jackson. I think the Spanish-American War actually was right around the 1890s. Remember Pershing, General Pershing?
No.
The Pershing
Well,
missile.
where was Davy Crockett and all this?
Oh, they were before the Civil War.
Way before.
They were before the Civil War.
Civil.
Alamo.
Alamo, yeah, the Alamo. I'm
Yeah.
thinking of that, where he took it. You know, everybody grew up. He had the gun, hitting him with the.
I had the coonskin cap. Yeah. yeah.
Everybody, and a Bowie knife. Remember the Bowie knife?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the disappointments in my life. Do you have to take Tennessee history in elementary school or
Probably.
junior high school?
I probably didn't
had a
listen to
red
that
book.
either.
And I'd seen Walt Disney's Davy Crockett. I knew Davy
Yeah.
Crockett. I opened up the Tennessee history, and I'm getting to the part about that. Well, I know all about this.
Yeah.
I'm making good grade on
Yeah.
this one. They got a picture of Davy Crockett. It wasn't nothing like the Davy Crockett on Walt Disney, didn't it? What was the guy that
Who
played that?
played that?
Wes Parker.
Yeah.
What,
he didn't look
was
nothing
it?
like Fess Parker.
Best part. You know, he played Daniel Boone and Davy
That
Crockett.
bothered me
That
too.
bothered
That
me.
bothered me
That's
too.
when I knew something.
Yeah.
I knew something was up.
Yeah. Well, I was going to tell you this story about being in Desert Storm. There's a bunch of good ones. And I think I'd mentioned to you about my spiritual experiences, and I won't get into that. But I felt like everybody over there was my boss. I mean, I was like I felt like I was a low man on the totem pole. I had some guys that worked with me, but we were just running around doing and reporting to everybody. Well, I got sent to Riyadh around Thanksgiving of 1990, and to help with a detachment of guys. We had about 8 or 10 of us to help organize their rear area security, because we'd pretty much had everything in Dhahran at least organized. And so I ended up working for a guy who was a lieutenant colonel. And I'll never forget, talk about another chance meeting. His name was James Maxwell Bosley. And the reason I remember James Maxwell Bosley is my son's name is James Maxwell Carter. So he had the same
What
name
are
as
the
my
odds?
son.
Yeah.
And so I ended up liking
Yeah.
this guy because he was had my son's name, right? My son had his name. And so anyway, he at one point we had to go brief General Yosak about the rear battle plans that we had done, and securing the Patriot missiles and the Air Force bases and all a bunch of stuff going on. And so I was to go with him. And I'm nervous. He's going to be briefing this general, 4-star general. And my whole function in life for this briefing, I had one slide to put on the overhead projector, and I was to make sure it wasn't upside down. And I'm thinking, if I screw this up, it's one slide, how can I miss this?
Yeah.
I think I was more nervous about that than about anything.
Well, did you mess it up?
No, we got it right. You got it right.
And looking back, if you'd messed it up, what would have been the big deal?
Well, that was the thing. I think about that. What are they going to do? Send me home? Well, I didn't want to be there in the first place.
Well, it was more natural to have it upside down. I always think of, Sergeant Carter. He would have got mad.
Yeah. It was I was scared to death.
Was it bittersweet when you came out of the military? When? In about 2003?
I retired in 08.
08.
And I told you that before, I had the opportunity to go on to war college, which would have been another 2-year obligation, but I would have set me up for general. I had made colonel, but you gotta have war college before you can make a general officer. But I also had this calling to go pastor this church up in the mountains, and I couldn't do both. And so I missed the military. I missed having a group of guys that work hard together, that just the camaraderie of the military, and having a mission to do and that. But man, it was a lot of time. I spent a lot of time doing that, and I miss it, but I'm glad I didn't.
Now, isn't there a 4-star and 5-star colonel, or how's that ranking?
You're colonel, and then you go to 1-star general, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star. There's not a 5-star. There's not a 5-star unless you have a war.
If so, in the war you could have a 5-star,
Yeah.
and then after 5-star general, what is there?
President.
So that's the buck. That's where the buck stops there.
Yeah.
Would a second general, a 2-star general, would salute a 1-star general?
Well, the other way around. The 1-star is lower than the 2-star.
Oh, so 5-star is the highest.
Yeah.
Yeah, if in war times.
Yeah.
Who decides that you're a 5-star?
Well, really, every commissioned officer is an act of Congress. That they sign it, but when you get up to the
Commissioned
general level,
office. You mean a colonel?
well, you have the second lieutenant's the lowest ranking commissioned officer, second lieutenant, first lieutenant, captain, major, lieutenant colonel, colonel, and then generals. But to get to the general officer, the president has to be involved in that.
So it becomes a little more political, maybe than.
Yeah, and I don't know how. Well, I mean, but yeah.
Like being a 33rd degree Mason's tough.
I guess.
I guess.
Sound like a construction job.
Yeah. How about did you ever have any like, I don't want to say depression, but from leaving the military and you're going to go up, from not going to from going up there and preaching, was it just so totally different that you just felt, you can feel different and odd, and that'll make you feel like you're not feeling right, but it's just different.
I didn't have a problem like that. The problem I had later on in life was whenever I had to give up the church and came back and didn't do that. And I was depressed for a year after I came out of ministry because I just, and I told you that story, but, God's got me doing a lot of this stuff now. But going from retiring from the military in 08 and being able to, and being called to the pastorship, it was almost to me, I know people look at it differently, but this is just the way I looked at it. It was another mission. Rather than doing a mission to go train soldiers, I'm going to a mission up in this church to do that. So it was a mission. I don't know. That didn't bother me. Matter of fact, I think I took hold of that pretty good.
Did you feel almost relieved, like, okay, now I'm doing what I think I should be doing?
In a way, I missed it, and I still, some of my best friends, I'll probably tell you that there's about once a month, a couple of my Army buddies and I get together and have lunch, and just and that's a long time ago. Yeah, and you miss being a part of something that what you think's important, but a part of that church was, I think, more important from the spiritual aspect of it.
People that are in jail for a long time, they have what they call that, where they feel lost when they get out into the world. So some of it is just routine.
Yeah. Remember the Shawshank Redemption?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was part of what they talked about when Red got out. Remember when Red got out, and you thought, well, he might hang himself. And
Yeah.
He ended up getting that note, and you know the story.
Well, see, Red. Which one was Red? Was
He
that
was the black guy.
The black guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Morgan Freeman.
Yeah, Morgan Freeman. Yeah.
But he didn't go back in, did he?
No, but when at least I got the feeling when he just gets out, he makes probation or for whatever
Yeah.
he gets out, and he's working at that grocery store,
Yeah.
and he's having a hard time, not asking to go to the bathroom.
Right.
But there's a scene where he's at his room, and there's this, you get the feeling like he might hang himself, but some
Right.
other guys had already hung themselves that had done that. And
Yeah, I remember him finding the note.
yeah.
I'd like to watch that for my kids, except
That's
for
a great movie.
a couple of those bad scenes. I
Yeah.
guess you fast forward through it.
Yeah.
But There's
I love Morgan Freeman.
boy, he's one of the
yeah,
best.
Yeah,
He's one of the best.
yeah,
You know, if whatever he's in, it's the best.
yeah,
He's the Tom Hanks, isn't
Yeah,
he?
yeah.
I guess he's better than Tom Hanks.
yeah. Some ways.
So when the guy was sanding his boat at the end of the thing, was he finally happy?
My feeling was he was free, and then he had his buddy Morgan Freeman came down there, and that's kind of how it ended.
That was a good ending. A lot
Yeah.
of shows won't end that good,
Yeah,
but that was a good ending. It was like they're okay now, but it was odd seeing them before they got to the beach when they were just civilians, and that was a different. You know, they had a different relationship. It's just different when you're.
yeah,
You know, I've been going to East Ridge for the past 4 months and eating there and going to their hardware stores and their gas stations and stuff like that. I'm ready to get out of there. But there's some part of me that a week or so later, I will miss the area.
Yeah.
What do you call that?
I don't know. It's like one of the Army sayings that somebody said that's pretty wise. They said, for a soldier, the worst place he's ever been is where he is right now. The best place is where he just came from. There's always that idea that is back here was better. Well, remember the story of the Israelites coming out of Egypt? And they're wandering around 40 years, and they're grumbling, well, we just stayed in Egypt. At least we had something to eat. You remember that?
That's when Moses hit the rock, right?
Yeah. So I think that's human
Was
nature.
a bad move on his part, wasn't it?
Yeah.
God didn't let him in after that,
Yeah.
right? Well, he cursed God, right?
I don't remember cursing God.
I think he hit the rock and cursed God.
He may,
And then he didn't let him in. He had led those people all the way that time. And
but if you think about that from a military standpoint, it makes perfect sense. Because Moses led them up through all the training years. They trained them. They transformed them from being a bunch of slaves into some pretty elite military guys. And they had a couple of training exercises along the way when they would get attacked, and all of a sudden they're getting trained up to be a military. They got that trainer in Moses, but they needed a pattern to take them into the promised land.
which was who?
It was Joshua. Yeah. That's a military standpoint.
Now, why was Joshua picked?
I just think
He was a cleanup batter, the pinch hitter, the seventh inning pitcher.
Well, he'd been Moses' aide for all that time, so he'd learned all that stuff. I think he must have had that personality of just a combat leader. You know, you don't want Patton in charge of the political. You know, Patton got in trouble for politics, like MacArthur did. Mm. But you sure did like that guy during the middle of the war. You know?
Yeah. Hey, don't they still in Italy have one day? They have a national holiday for Patton, I think.
I wouldn't doubt it. Yeah.
I think they do. I mean, they attribute that to, you know, that was a good movie, wasn't it, Patton?
Oh, yeah.
Which was better, Patton or Shawshank Redemption? Toss up in.
I'd go with Shawshank Redemption, but I like Patton. Yeah. Because what you see in Patton is, you know, the Eisenhower was kind of the politician, and which is a good thing he was in that role, because Patton would have got us, you know, going to fight with the Russians at that point also.
Well, he thought he was reincarnated, right?
Yeah.
Who was it he thought he was?
Wasn't it Alexander the Great?
I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe. But he thought he was reincarnated.
Yeah.
It might have been Alexander the Great.
Yeah.
You know, he really believed that, didn't he?
I don't know, but
Yeah, but that's what
the movie said.
and that's what some of the history books say.
Yeah.
But I always remember that. Did you ever watch Back to School? That scene with that Rodney Dangerfield played Back to School?
Yeah.
Remember in the classroom, he said, I'll tell you why. He said, because MacArthur was too much of a sissy to let Patton go in or something like that, and then he got on the teacher's side. That was a good scene too. Do you think in life, as we go through, that one of our hang-ups is comparing ourselves to someone else, whether it be their looks, their successes, their marriage, their kids, their money, their money? How much does that impact us every day? And is anybody immune? You know, people say, "Oh, I don't care what they think."
Well, they say that they're probably lying. Because I think you're right. I think we all are to a certain extent. I think, and again, this is my prejudice, my view, but I think being a believer in Christ, you kind of get over that. You kind of, maybe not over it, but learn to deal with it and realize that it is differences. But for most people, I think that's what drives them.
Competition.
Yeah.
Or trying to. Yeah. I mean, people will, they'll sell their soul to do as well as the neighbor, and it means nothing.
Yeah.
Because the neighbor had everybody has their own advantages.
I mean, you've heard it said, and you probably know it's true, just like I do, that, some of the more satisfied folks in the world are the poorest.
Absolutely. Yeah. Almost every time.
Yeah.
Not even really. Now, anybody listening will say, well, you're crazy. I've seen it too many times.
Yeah.
I've seen it too many times.
I have mentioned this to you before, but when I went on several mission trips to some third world countries, and even meeting a few people in Saudi Arabia, the average guy, the poor guy over there, really wants his family to do good. He wants his son to do well, whatever that is. But he's not really that fired up about going to war or taking over a plot. But it's the politicians that do it. I think most of us are like that. You want your children to do okay.
That's all I'm here for.
Yeah.
It really.
Yeah.
That's all I care about.
Yeah.
I don't even care about me that much.
Particularly when you get our age, I'm not gloom and doom, but my life is what it is, what had been made. People think at me and look at me and they say, well, he's, I'm not going to change their opinion generally, I don't think.
They say Colonel Sanders didn't start the chicken business till he's 65. You got to think to yourself, what's the point? I mean, really.
Well, so I think the point is what we're doing right now, and is developing and nurturing a relationship.
For what end?
Because I think hopefully somebody's going to look at this and they're going to say, well, that very question, why are they doing that? What's going on? And I think, in my view, I hope people look at us and realize, those guys are pretty good guys. And why are they pretty good guys? And maybe it's because they're Christians and that's what they're taught to do. And if more people were like that, the better the world might be.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people do get that. I think a lot of people that watch this show even look at the thinking that different people have, right or wrong. And I think they almost feel more common. That makes sense.
I think about, and I don't know you that well, but I've just taken from our conversation, we've got a little bit different in our theological understandings, backgrounds.
Maybe.
And we've got a little bit difference in what we did in life. And I've had different experiences. But I want to think that our relationship has turned into a pretty good thing. And nothing because of what we were, but we're just honest with each other.
And we're not running for politics.
Exactly.
It's not like I'm trying to win anything.
Right.
It's not like I'm making any money off this.
Yeah.
Which I should, but I don't.
You think about what, you probably know more about this than I do, but what impact does this have on some people?
You know,
And you take those people that have a positive impact because of this, they're going to take that positive and have a positive impact on somebody else that's never seen this show because of. So you just never really know.
you never really know. And my only goal is to just enjoy talking to people and thought, hey, I'll film it. It's not really an interview. It's just a discussion. We've talked about Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, we ain't really talked about none of the stuff I had on my list.
How do you get to Shawshank Redemption? You know what I'm saying? But if it was a strict interview and you had to go to school to learn how to do it, I wouldn't even be interested. It's not my thing.
But how you're treating folks is pretty important, and I suspect that you treat folks every day like you treat me.
Yeah, I try to.
And so there you go. And it's like this young lady that's helping me write this book. We just sat around talking, and it's worked out where she's going to help me do this. And a lot of this is because you suggested that to me.
It's full circle.
Yeah, she don't know you. I don't. She may have seen this show. I don't know, and haven't asked her.
Where is she from?
She's from the Chattanooga area, I think. It's where her parents live now. I think they raised somewhere else, but she's graduated from Lee
Like in the last 3 years
in
or
December. This past December.
And she work anywhere currently?
She was working, yes, and I don't know where. She told me, but I don't recall. And now she's got a full-time job in Chattanooga, but that's not what she wants to do. She wants to write. And so, it's like anything else. I'm going to do what I can to make a living until I can do what I want to do.
You're her first client.
I'm her first one. Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah.
What are you going to name the book? Call the book.
I have no idea. We put a good question mark on it. I don't know.
You could say from Lebanon to Foreigner.
Yeah, Laverne. Grew up in Laverne. Yeah, she's spent, I don't know, I've seen 20 or 30 pages of just maybe getting born.
Where's Laverne?
You know where Smyrna, Tennessee is?
Yeah.
It's right beside Smyrna.
That way off the interstate? Further away from the interstate?
It's between Smyrna and Nashville. It's right on the road for Davidson County
Oh, that's
line.
right, yeah. I lived in Gallatin for like a year.
Okay.
On Gallatin Road.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
But I remember passing Laverne. I always thought of LaGrange, that ZZ Top song. When I passed her, I thought, no, it's not LaGrange, it's Laverne.
Well, because Laverne now is just, part of the bedroom community between Nashville and Murfreesboro. But when I grew up, it was pretty much just rural wooded.
It was just I wouldn't know Nashville now. It's been so long. I don't know if this progress is good or not.
Yeah, I agree.
I just don't know.
But folks got to be somewhere,
They say I think there's a population decrease.
Oh, there's no question there's a population problem.
I told somebody that and they horse laughed me. They're still laughing.
Oh.
But to me, it's just obvious.
Think about this. Where is all the garbage going to go in 50 years? Everybody makes garbage.
I don't know.
You been out to our landfill lately?
Oh, remember how it used to be fairly level?
Yeah.
It's a mountain.
Yeah. Those are the huge problems that I think our legislators and Congress ought to be dealing with rather than some of this other stuff they talk about.
I think there ought to be one central location that everything's hauled to. And it's divided up and, divide the plastics and the metals and this. They could do that on the mass level.
Well, I don't know why. Our city did that. We had recycle for a while here. And I know they said it was not economic, but it's not all economic. I thought that was a good thing.
I heard that it really didn't go to a different place anyhow. I heard that.
I don't know.
But
I take my stuff to the recycle place now, about every couple of weeks. We save it.
The plastics
and the aluminums and glass and cardboard, but every now and then you go over there and particularly the plastics, they'll say, we've got all the plastics we can take right now.
Yeah, I never understood that. What? You just take them, right? Bring them.
Yeah.
I don't even know what they do with that stuff.
Assume they recycle them somehow. Or I don't really know either.
If I was a young guy, that's what I'd get into, recycling. I'd figure out how to take tires and metal, and I'd figure out how to do that.
Well, we used to do, when I was a kid, and you probably remember this too, we could go along the side of the road, pick up Coca-Cola bottles, take them in and sell them for 3 cents.
Yeah, I was like a nickel or, yeah, it was pretty significant.
Well,
I mean, you could get quite a bit, especially if you took one back from your house.
What I remember, you could get 5 bottles, and you could get 15 cents. You could get a Coca-Cola for a dime and a candy bar for a nickel.
All you had to do is find
5 bottles.
Did people throw that many bottles out?
They did in Laverne.
I guess they did here too, because
Yeah.
a lot of people did that.
Yeah.
Well, they'd get you now if you just threw a bottle out, wouldn't they?
Oh, yeah.
They ought to give you something for the plastic. Surely it's worth a penny.
But I think people would maybe do it more because all you had to do is take it back to the grocery store.
You'd create somebody'd pick it up.
Yeah, but if the grocery store did it, if you remember, at least the way it was.
Oh yeah. I remember working in them, and you had to leave room for the Coca-Cola guy. You had to have his stacked up where he could pick them up and leave the others. Remember those big ones that were those big liters? Those things were dangerous, weren't they?
Yeah. But why did we stop that?
They started putting them in plastic, and the plastic people would just throw out, I guess. But I would think they could take them, and there's some guy out that he dredges the oceans and make stuff out of it and sells it, stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I think if we wanted to bad enough, we could do it.
I don't mind plastic or paper cups. That's what I use.
Yeah.
I mean, they're fine.
Yeah.
You know, what more am I going to do? I'm going to take it home with me.
Yeah. I remember Dad, I don't know if he took them back to him, but Crystal used to have real cups, really good cups.
Oh, with like the Roadrunner on them?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Some people still have those.
Yeah. They take those
Yeah,
back.
Batman. You get the whole series, try to get the whole...
I just remember Crystal being on it. Crystal looked like a little store.
Well, McDonald's used to have where you could get all the cups. You know,
But these are regular. These weren't plastic. These were like
Well, these were too, glass.
porcelain. Yeah.
And you tried to get the whole series, the Roadrunner and something else. Yeah, you can still buy some down at the antique parlor. But right here it says you were in the Assistant Intelligence Officer corporate division team, 87th Division.
Yeah. Yeah. That was just one of the when you go into a unit to evaluate them and to prepare for an exercise, you go into every part of that unit in a brigade or division level unit. They have intelligence and they have logistics. I mean, they're self-supporting.
Oh.
And so everything.
So you weren't in the division, you were in there to evaluate
Yeah.
their operations.
And I think my background from Desert Storm really helped qualify me to go do that.
Oh, you couldn't hardly done it otherwise. It's like building a house and you hadn't had one built. You just have to be there, even on whatever level it was.
Yeah.
At Desert Storm, how long were you there?
August till April, around 8-9 months.
Did you stay at motels?
No, we were in the middle of the desert.
In tents?
Yeah,
That no air conditioning?
yeah.
No primitive form of air?
No, remember I told you I woke up that first morning in
Yeah.
the tent just sweating? Well, eventually they built some outhouses. We had an outhouse, but the one I remember was that the showers they built. And the water truck would come by of a morning and put water in the top of where the shower, and you stand out there and pull a thing and
Like MASH.
yeah. First one, I tell you how stupid I am. It didn't occur to me. I thought to myself, well, I'll just wait till the evening because everybody else is trying to get a shower. I'll let them go.
Yeah.
Didn't occur to me that water had been out in that sun all day long. Yeah, and I pulled that, it's scalding hot. I couldn't run it out through there.
I bet the container was metal that it was in too, right?
Probably.
Yeah.
That's why everybody else is doing it in the morning.
When you pulled the thing, how long did the water come out, or did you have to keep it
You just
pulled?
had to keep it pulled.
So you didn't rinse off for 6 months, I guess, completely, right? Just rinsing from the water coming out.
Oh, yeah.
Phew. And you'd have to take a shower every night with that heat and sweat, wouldn't you?
Well, you didn't. I didn't. We didn't. Because if the water truck hadn't come by, then there wasn't any shower to take.
And everybody knew that. Say, oh, it's out of water.
Yeah.
Well, that was a real war, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, even though you had some modern conveniences, did they eat sea rations or?
What we had we call MREs, meals ready to eat. So
Yeah.
we'd gone from the sea ration, which I actually like better.
The sea
And
rations?
they were in cans to these things that are in the pouches. Yeah.
You know, I bought 24 of them and put it in the basement of my house in case something happens. I got 24 things, and we ate them one night just to see.
How'd you like them?
It was okay. I had it was okay. It had cocoa, Tang,
Yeah. That stuff.
a bag of hot tea, a little coffee. It had more drink stuff in it, but it had real food.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. It's weird how that stuff heats up, isn't it?
Yeah, there was talking about drinking. I remember there was a standing order while we were in the desert. I think we had to drink so many liters of water every day. It was required to drink some because you don't know you're sweating because the wind's blowing all the time and it just dries it up. And I didn't know I was sweating until you get in the tent where you're in like an oven. Then you can see the perspiration. But heat casualties was probably the biggest problem we had over there.
Heat stroke, did you say?
Not stroke, but it could have been, but different type of heat casualties, dehydration.
So, how much were you required? When you say required, they just recommended.
No, well, it was standing order, and order meant you had to do it. Because I don't know how you police that up, but somebody.
But in the military, you do it just because it's a standing order.
Well, you're supposed to. Yeah.
And people generally do that.
Yeah.
It's just in your brain. Do what they say.
Well, particularly something like that, it's something that you need to do. It's good for you. They're not going to tell you to sit there and drink X amount of water because they.
What'd they say, like 8?
It was so many liters a day. I forget how much. But it pretty much, if you didn't have a liter of bottled water with you, you'd get in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Boy, it's something. War as hell, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, do you ever think that you'll go back into preaching like at Foreigner? Do you ever think about just going up there one Sunday morning and reliving that period?
I don't know. I preached here 2 weeks ago. So I preach, I don't know, every couple of months. If the pastor's got to be gone somewhere, he'll call on somebody to do it. And I tell him, well, if I'm available if you need me. And
How long do you preach?
probably 10 or 15 minutes.
So it's not 45 minutes or
No.
something?
I learned a long time ago from being a trial lawyer that if you say something, if you can't say it in about 10 minutes, I'm going to lose the jury. And I figure I'm going to lose the congregation if I go over 10 minutes. So.
With the jury, do you have to really drill down in about 10 minutes or 8 minutes or 15 or 12?
Well, hopefully, I've sort of felt like preparing a worship service is kind of like preparing for trial. Throughout the trial, you're trying to make your point. In opening arguments, you're sort of suggesting to the jury, here's what the think proof's going to be, and here's how I think you ought to look at it. Well, if you think about a worship service, you start out with the songs that kind of get you ready to go, and you might have a prayer to get you thinking about it. So that's the preparatory. Then you got the evidence that comes in a trial.
Where would that be?
That's whatever you testify, you say you saw, smelled, taste, or touch, some witness.
But where is that in the worship service?
Oh, that's reading the Bible. You have Bible reading. That's the evidence.
Scripture and prayer, we call it.
Yeah. And then I always looked at the sermon was kind of like closing argument. They said it's sort of the same, at least the way I looked at it.
Our preacher's 15 minutes, something like that, maybe 16. He can get it said pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, and when I found if you can't, nobody's going to hear it anyway.
Well, I remember growing up, it wasn't nothing unusual for him to be 45 minutes long.
Yeah. What did you get out of that?
Scared to death. Right?
Right. Yeah.
You think God's out to get us, or you think he's...
Absolutely not. If he wouldn't have died for us.
You think he's like a good lawyer trying to find some loopholes for us?
I think he made the loophole. Yeah. If you think about it, and this is again my take on this, that every single one of us are guilty. We just are.
Absolutely.
Disobedience to God, we're guilty. But in lieu of separating us from himself, he's decided to make that transition or that gap for himself. So he takes on the punishment that we should have got. And it's for all that. The difficulty I have in understanding it is there's a lot of these guys over here I don't much like. How could God want to take care of them just like he's taking care of me and you? Because they're not good. You and I are pretty decent people. But
well,
I'm glad he's God and he's got that problem figured out.
Maybe they're fallen angels and they're not, what they call it now, that new term, NPC. Maybe they're an NPC.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just glad he's got that decision and not me.
I was watching All in the Family last night, and I'm on way down in the 6th season. And Edith, Archie was upset because Gloria and Meathead were getting a divorce. And Gloria said, "It's none of your business." And Archie said, "It is my business and it's God's business." And Edith said, "Well, if it's God's business, then you let God handle it." I thought that was pretty good.
She's probably the smartest one of the whole group.
Yeah. Well, she was a good actor, too. You don't realize. So is that the way you look at it?
Sort of. Yeah, I want to. But I do have a tendency to want to judge, and that's not what I'm supposed to do, but I ain't perfect yet.
So how much of this stuff do we try to control if we think God's in control and we see all these coincidences? I mean, if God had it in mind for you to preach at Foreigner and you hadn't have met that guy at the barbecue,
yeah,
and you ignored it, would he have brought somebody else in there and just kept going till you were at Foreigner?
Yeah, I don't know. I want to think yes, but I don't, I guess my view is this. Ultimately, God's will be done. He wants you and I to be part of that will and for us to choose to be part of that will. But he lets us choose. How we choose may affect me and my family, but his will ultimately is going to be done.
But Moses didn't get in because he struck the rock.
Was that the ultimate thing though? Was it just about physical geography, or was it spiritual?
He said from this day forward, I believe.
Yeah, but did Moses, after he died, became with God spiritually?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, so, God wasn't mad at him on that end.
So that's the ultimate.
I think he was just.
Yeah. So the ultimate.
Now, that's a good point.
The ultimate thing is
he was punished.
The ultimate thing was to be in the presence of God forever, spiritually.
Yeah, I don't think he was mad at him on that. I just think this was your.
There are consequences for when we screw up.
And maybe the people wasn't going to follow him after he had done that. You know, maybe it.
I was reading last week. You remember the story of Joshua goes into the promised land, and they take over Jericho.
Surrounded the wall.
Yeah, and then they go to another place, and then they're going to go to another one. But and it's either the second or third place. Joshua says, "All right, now God said for y'all not to take any plunder from this place. And that means if they couldn't take the gold and silver and women and cattle and all that, you can't. All this stuff's going to be God's stuff, and we're going to be okay." Well, this one character that decided I think it was a blanket and maybe some gold and silver he took, a fellow by the name of Achan. You remember Achan, the story of Achan? And so Achan disobeys. Well, the next battle they go to, they get routed. And so Joshua is saying, God, why did you send us here to get routed? And he's having this conversation. God said, well, there's somebody in your camp been disobedient. Now you think about Achan simply took some gold and silver and a blanket for himself. How many people in this battle got killed because of his disobedience?
Yeah, that's pretty tough to figure out.
And then the second thing that happens is they finally figure out it was Achan. He confesses, and you know what they did to him? They took him, his entire family, everything what he owned outside, stoned him and burned him to death. Not only did he get punished, but his whole family got punished. A bunch of soldiers got killed out here because of that. So there are consequences to things that we do. Doesn't mean that Achan wasn't forgiven, but he had to suffer the consequences.
Well, that's a tough one to figure out.
That is. But you remember the story, right? Is that fairly accurate?
That's right.
Yeah.
We got to think maybe there was something else. Maybe his whole family was just bad eggs.
Doesn't say that. I don't know. And I'm just saying that there are consequences. Think about things that you've done, I've done in life. There were consequences.
Yeah, boy, it's scary, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's hard to figure all that out.
I don't.
And everybody else, so it's in the Old Testament,
Yeah.
right? Doesn't count.
We were, I don't know if I told you, but I'm helping teach a class at church from middle school, high school kids. And one of them asked that sort of question the other night. And the pastor did a good job. He said, let's look at the Bible. He says, find where the Old Testament and New Testament are separated. And they do. 2/3 of the Bible is the Old Testament. 1/3 is the New Testament. Mm-hmm. That'll tell you something. You ought to be studying it.
Studying the back.
Yeah, we don't just study the 1/3, the 1/3 of the Bible. We need to study the entire Bible.
Well, they included it, right?
Yeah.
Except some
2/3 of our Bible is Old Testament, Torah, ancient Israel stuff. Yeah.
Boy, it's a lot to study. The more you study the Bible, the more really confused you get in a way.
Well, you got to hunt for stuff. I saw something last week in the Bible. I've read the Bible every
Wasn't
year.
it Achan, not Achan?
I think it's Achan. I don't know.
All right, go ahead.
But in that story, I picked this up last week, and I've read through the Bible every year since 2008. And you think, well, I ought to pick up
12 years.
Yeah.
No.
So I read something in this whole, and you all may have seen this before, but when Joshua takes the children of Israel into the promised land, there's a passage in there that says, now you're going to eat off of the fruit of the land. I'm not going to provide manna anymore. Mm-hmm. I never saw that. I never knew when manna stopped until then. And so I got to thinking about that. Well, maybe what that lesson is for me that I need to find out is that God provides for me what I need when I need it. He gave me manna until I didn't eat it. Now
And he only really gave enough for them to eat that day, I
Yeah.
believe, wasn't it?
Yeah. But I never saw that passage before. I thought, man, here I am, read this thing every year.
You know, they say that's where the medical snake comes on the scene, because didn't they hold up a serpent?
Well, that was back when they were back in the wilderness. Yeah, they did something they screwed up, and God sent a bunch of snakes to bite them, and Moses prayed to God, said, give them a break, and God said, well, put this snake on a stick, and they see it, they'll be all right. I got to think, that's almost like an idol. It seems strange to me that God would do that. He said, don't put things like that.
But then they stopped biting them.
Yeah. Then they started worshiping the snake. And
Never fails, does it? But some people claim that's where we get the sign of the DNA.
Yeah. Well, it's where the medical profession gets theirs.
But some people say that the earlier pictures actually look like a DNA.
Oh, really?
Yeah, of course, that's another
Never heard
conspiracy.
that.
There's more conspiracy theories out there.
Well, that'd be pretty cool if it was.
Yeah. It wouldn't be relevant, would it?
It might be God telling you I had it all along.
What kind of books? Did you read the New Testament or you read the NIV?
Well, the NIV is
do you read the King James Version or
I have, but my study Bible is the New English version.
So that's the one you've read every year since 2000?
No, I read a different. I have one that I read and take notes in, but I also have a study Bible, like if I'm going to preach or my Sunday school listening. But the one I read and take notes in, I give it to somebody at the end of the year. I've given one to all my children. I've given one to all my grandchildren.
So you write notes in it?
Yeah.
Black pen? Whatever pen you got?
Yeah. And I've gotten where I buy one of these Bibles. You can go buy them, and they got in the margins note places where you can take notes.
Is that Bible real? It had to be thicker, wouldn't it?
Yeah, pretty thick.
Remember how they used to put the date of the marriages on? I was heard the other day where.
Well, those old antique or legal documents. They can be admitted in court.
Now that is what I read the other day, and I had no idea. In other words, back in 1700s, you decided to marry this person, that enter it into the Bible, and that was a marriage.
I guess. Yeah.
And then later on, they started saying, well, you got to get a license.
Yeah.
Which I guess was a money thing. Could you be married in America now by putting it in the Bible? Or would you not be legally bound by Tennessee?
Well, see that to me, there's a difference between what the church, what I morally can do, and what the state does.
Yeah, you have to start dividing that up in your head when you start talking, don't you? Which one am I?
Yeah.
Which one am I?
Yeah, like in the state of Alabama, there's a thing called common law marriage. If you just stay long enough and you're married, but in Tennessee, we don't have common law marriage.
Well, if you say, I don't want to be married, I'm just living with her.
Yeah. If that's the issue comes in, okay, now if we divorce or we separate and never was married, who owns this stuff? How we separate? I
Then they get into a civil argument.
and then we have a fight and somebody gets shot. And
Now, what about in Louisiana? Aren't they under the Napoleonic?
yeah, they're
What do they call that?
the Napoleonic Code, French Code, yeah. Which I don't know how much different it is, but
Do you know anything specifically different?
only thing, no, not really. I know they don't call their geographic areas counties over there. They call them parishes.
Parishes, yeah. But I think their marriages are a little different too.
Yeah, I don't know.
But what about like when you go to, you hear them say, the Commonwealth of so-and-so.
Kentucky.
The Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
I think it's just a nomenclature. I don't think there's any real difference because we're all now in the United States are controlled by legislative laws. And so the Commonwealth would have evolved from the old English Commonwealth, whereas the Napoleonic Code would have developed from the French Code.
So you're saying the only differences from the states would be just maybe their state laws,
Yeah.
not anything different.
I don't think. I mean, there are definitely difference in each state laws, like if you have a will probated.
Yeah.
There may be different ways of doing that.
Or abortions, or all the different state stuff.
Yeah.
Wonder which state isn't there one state that's a really different? What am I trying to say? Not common. They always say it on the Miss America pageant. They'll say the so and so. It's maybe Vermont or something, Maine. So you're saying they're all basically the same?
I think fundamentally that, yeah.
You just have to be licensed in that state to practice law in that state to know that.
One of the things that I've had a little problem with over the years is, for example, the death penalty. You know, and the legislature in Tennessee may say, okay, and if you commit this crime under these circumstances, you can get the death penalty. But you go down to Kentucky and they may say, no, it's just second-degree murder.
You were standing over here.
Yeah.
When you did it. In fact, you were standing here, but you shot him over there. Now you'd have a problem.
Yeah. And the problem in Tennessee, I think, is that it's not certain that a death penalty is going to be. It gives the district attorney actually the ability to choose. You know, if I have the very same set of facts that happened in Bradley County and they happen in Rutherford County, the DA over here may decide to seek the death penalty. The DA over here may decide not to seek the death penalty.
That doesn't seem really right.
So
leaving that in their discretion.
So what the legislature should do, I think, is if you're going to have a death penalty, is you say in every case where these things happen, whatever those things are, you will seek the death penalty, not may.
Right. I really have a problem with the death penalty.
Oh, I do too.
I really.
Yeah.
I just, too much I've seen too many people get blamed for stuff they didn't do that I just think, man. You ever watched Josh Dublin on that Innocence Project or anything?
I know about it.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of people that they come out and find out that they weren't even guilty.
Yeah. Another issue that I have, I don't know why, now that we have DNA, why wouldn't they want to go back and find out the truth? If you could do the DNA testing to make sure, why wouldn't you?
That's suspect in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guess they'd say, now if they said, well, I guess because everybody'd sue them, and they'd say, now we'll check your DNA, but but if you're found to be not guilty, you can't sue us.
Yeah, I think that's the way it is anyway. You can't sue the government unless the government tells you can.
But you hear these people getting so many millions because they were wrongfully convicted. Maybe that's not. Maybe they're suing somebody else.
Is that really an argument for that though? Isn't the argument better to do the right thing?
It's the right thing. It's criminal. I think it's criminal to. I really have a problem without having something on camera because eyewitness testimony. I mean, me and you can't even. Next week we'll have a hard time agreeing on what each other was wearing.
Yeah.
Unless we go back and look at it.
I got a case I'm working on right now, and I went and talked to a witness the other day, and he swears that the bullets came from inside the building. And he didn't see it, but he was in the vicinity, and he said, I could tell by hearing it.
Yeah.
Well, I go look at the building. there's all kind of bullet holes. They're all going in. There ain't a single bullet hole coming out. But he believes that.
And there's no convincing him of that,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah,
So that's what I'm saying.
yeah.
And I think there might be a thing as false memories. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, we can watch two different movies. I think people are always watching two different movies at the same time. I just don't. That's why really have a problem with the death penalty. Now, if somebody did it and they said they did it, kill them, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Because I was a prosecutor for many years, and I've been involved in a couple of death penalty cases, but I don't know.
There's some evil people out there in there.
Yeah.
I mean, evil.
Yeah. I go back to the thing. Whatever in Tennessee is right on one side ought to be the same on the other side. And so the legislature needs to man up and say, look, here's what the law is going to be. And
Yeah, it's almost like they're saying we don't know what the law is.
we don't want to make that decision because it's not politically advantageous to do it. So the DA or the law, they got to make that decision. Well, you know.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I've said this, for the DAs that I've worked for have been really good people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know of any of them that's done anything politically as a result of that. But I just still say whatever that is here ought to be the same in the other part of the state.
Yeah, they shouldn't have to make that decision. It should be this, if it's these things, then these are the consequences.
That's what
they
the
can't decide whether or not you're going too fast or not. There needs to be a speed limit.
Yeah, and that's the legislature's job.
Boy, I tell you what,
We didn't talk much about the Army, did we?
no. Tell me more about the Army.
I don't know. What did you do?
Well, you got several promotions.
Yeah, I was. I think we talked about Desert Storm a lot. There was a lot of interesting things in there, but there's a lot of smart people in the Army. You know, we don't give credit for. I remember having a young man that worked for me. He was a young lieutenant, and he was an engineer. I think I read somewhere where he's sort of director of something in Huntsville at Redstone Arsenal now. But at that time we were just. But we had we got the mission to build a helipad, you know, a place where the helicopters should come, and. I don't think you're an engineer. I'm not, but he was, and he got that thing out and got all his books out and figured out how to build and we got to build a helipad. That was, those are the kind of things you got to do.
The people in getting those positions, usually it's not by mistake. It's not by accident.
Yeah, I mean, it's like to be an engineer. To be qualified to be an engineer, they have some pretty heavy duty schooling in the Army. Mm-hmm. I think it's like a year or so
Somebody that's young, that would be the thing to do in the time of peace, is to get in there and go to all the classes, do everything you can get into.
Well, I tell people that all the time, young people, and you know, there's no guarantee you're not going to be called up, but if you really sit back and look at the militaries, the Air Force is generally not going to be in harm's way.
No.
That's a pretty good sign. The Navy is not generally going to be in harm unless you're a SEAL or one of those special guys. It's generally not going to be in harm. Now, the Marine and Army is a better chance you're going to be in harm's way. But the good thing about the Army, it's so big, you have all sorts of opportunities in the Army to do stuff.
Yeah, if you got in a time when you didn't have war, you could probably get past needing you on the front line pretty quick if you really got to studying and moving up the ranks.
Yeah, and you can do that. And I know it's different. I retired in 08, and I know it's different now, but I always just felt like if I would just do what I was supposed to do and don't get out here and get in a bunch of trouble, that it's going. And then I did. I wasn't anything special.
You just went in and did your thing and followed the orders.
Yeah.
Like Gomer Pyle. He
Yeah.
did his thing.
Yeah.
And Forrest Gump. He just followed the rules.
Yeah. Yeah. You get educated, you know, they want you to be educated. Well, that's not a bad thing.
No.
You know?
What else on was the Army? Did you learn from there?
Well, I go back to Command General Staff College. I think I learned a lot about working with a staff. The Army is not about a commander ordering stuff all the time. Generally, you get a mission, and I may be the commander, but I've got an intelligence officer, I've got a logistics officer, I've got an operations guy, and I've got this staff to help me figure out how to make this plan. And so we make a plan using other people's expertise. And I think that helped me when I was pastoring a church, because I didn't go in the idea of I was going to tell these folks. I come in there, what is your expertise? How can we all work together to make this church work? And Command General Staff College taught me that goal, how to do that.
You were providing backline support, I guess, rear support.
Yeah. A part of that plan is what if you know, we got Navy SEALs and Army Green Berets that go into the deep. What if they do the same thing to us? And part of our job is to be able to combat those guys that come back there. So what assets do we have available? Where are they? And it's always fluid in the back, because everything in the back is hopefully getting to the front. So I may have a particular unit here today, but tomorrow they may be gone up front. And so keeping up how to defend in the rear is a pretty good task.
Yeah, and you're dealing with logistics too.
Yeah.
And you can't give them what you don't have.
Yeah. Oh, one of the funny things, we were, particularly around the Patriot units and at some of the Air Force bases, we were, you know, you put defense around the perimeter. And ideally, if you had, at some point, you would like to get concertina wire put at certain spots. And we didn't have any concertina wire. And as far as I knew, we couldn't get it. But we found, one of the guys saw I don't know how big a place this was, but it was full of barbed wire. Well, barbed wire is not concertina wire, but if that's all you got,
It's close.
you use it. And it was owned, I never will forget it, had a sign, owned by the Bank of Riyadh. And so I got to asking, I said, how can we get that? They ain't using it, we need it, can we get it? And they said they would give us, and so anyway, we had to negotiate with the Bank of Riyadh to get this barbed wire.
You have to pay them?
I don't know who did it. I mean, it wasn't me. It come out of somebody. And it may have been they gave it to us if we were in their country and they were supposed to be supporting us. So I don't know how.
Was it like a bunch of rows?
It was an acre.
Is that
And
right?
it was stacked up higher than me. It was. I never seen so much. And why they needed that, I don't know. But,
That's an odd thing to need.
But we got
Maybe
it.
they foreclosed on it.
I guess. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing you would do is, you know, okay, I ain't got concertina wire, but here's some barbed wire. Let's see if we can't use that.
Yeah, the Army, that's what everything works good on books till you get out there, and then you have to start.
Yeah.
Because you can't learn every scenario, I guess.
Oh, no.
Do you think that a lot of people, some people get addicted to being in the war zone?
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. When I came back, I didn't want to come back. To be honest with you, the very part of me didn't want to come back. I wanted to come back because I missed my kids and my family, and I missed the job. I was in the DA's office then. I missed that, but that part of me of, man, I'm doing something significant over here, and what I said meant something to these folks. I don't know. You know, you can get hung up on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was hard. It was hard coming back from being, somebody that was in a command position and being able to do stuff and people do it, to come back now, I'm dealing in a civilian world where people ain't going to just do something because I ask or I tell them to do it. I better be asking real nice. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like telling somebody, like if you work at a factory, if you're a plant manager and the employees got 401ks and sick time and 2 weeks paid vacation and et cetera, you can kind of boss them around. But you get out here in this general contractor or out in this world where these people, they'll just tell you to go fly a kite.
Right.
Man. You ain't gonna, they may and they may not.
Yeah.
And they don't care. And so you gotta create otherwise.
Yeah. Well, and another difference is, you know, we're on the other side of the world from where we all from.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my folks ain't nowhere close. I can't get there. We got to depend on each other.
Was there a lot of, did you stay with that 120 mostly that you flew over with?
Well, I did until probably Thanksgiving, and that's when I got sent with a detachment. You know, about 8 or 10 of us from that 120 to Riyadh to start doing that job. So we got split up after a couple months.
Was you glad to being split up like that?
No, absolutely not. It's like anything. I was used to what I was doing. I knew the routine. It was awful living, but I knew what was going on, and I had my own little family, the 120 guys we knew. And no, I didn't want to go. I argued a little bit about not going. But, you know, when your boss says go, ultimately you go.
But when you went over there with the 8 or 10 people, after a while, do you get so accustomed to that you don't want to leave that?
It was better for me, absolutely. We were living in tents in Dhahran. I get to Riyadh, this is where all the headquarters are. All of a sudden, I'm living in a building. I got air conditioning.
Ice.
Yeah, but I remember an indoor plumbing. I never forget having a bathtub. I hadn't had a bath in 3 or 4 months. That was pretty good.
Maybe it's what we get used to.
Yeah. I didn't want the folks back in Dhahran to know how good I had. I'm afraid they might take me back now.
So what was your main job there?
Doing the rear area security, making sure that what units were back there that we were able to help defend them if they got attacked by
I mean, when you were with the 8 to 10 people.
We did.
Same thing.
That's what. Yeah, they wanted us to take that concept and then I got some other folks assigned to me after I got there. And so it wasn't just us, but they brought us in because we had that expertise. Yeah.
You had a pretty important job.
Well, and I never did figure that out. Why that, because here I am, just a Tennessee Army National Guard captain, and it seemed like what we were doing were pretty important. So it sort of scared me a little bit to depend on me.
Yeah, because and you really weren't that old at the time.
No.
36, 37?
36, yeah. But for a soldier, that's pretty old, but yeah. But I stayed in a long time after that.
Is his core good, Gwen? How old has there an age limit before you can't sign up for the Army anymore?
There is.
What is it?
You've got to be able to get 20 years in before age 60. So 40.
You could go in at 38 now?
Yeah.
Well, I would have thought that would have been too old.
That's what it used to be, and that may be different. But the reason that I remember that is because I had a break in the service, and there was that. They said, "Well, can you get your 20 in before?" Oh, yeah, I can do that, and it didn't have any problem. But that used to be the rule.
It probably changes all the time. What else is there we need to cover?
I don't know. We've probably covered most everything. It's I've said this every time we've met, probably, but I am one of those fortunate people that's had a good experience, I think, in everything I've done. Not that everything was easy or pleasant along the way, but looking back at it, it was okay.
But you are the glass is half. I've noticed that a lot of times you will start off by saying, I was fortunate, or in that I was fortunate, or luckily for me. Mm. So you look at stuff more positive than a lot of people. That's your initial look. You look for the reason why you're advantaged.
Well, and I'm not sure you do at the time, but looking back at it, I think I do. You do.
You're always thinking how this was fortunate for me.
Well, and think about, and you've been around, but think about some of the third world countries and how those folk got to live. And we ain't never had it that bad, And I always thought in the Army, and maybe I was just fooling myself, but I always felt like that I always had a backup, that I could always get on the horn, get on the phone, and if I got into a bind, I could get back up.
In minutes.
In minutes. And so I never was really scared. I mean, when the first night we got fired at, when the Scud missiles were coming in and striking around us, I just remembered then. I said, well, if God wants to take me out, I mean, He can do that. And a ways to go, and I don't want to go, but I think I'd rather be blown up in a second than to be tortured.
So you're looking at it positive.
Yeah.
Did you go to the basement when they were bombing or anything like that?
Yeah.
They said, "Oh, air raid, air raid."
Basement. We had a location had a block building.
More secure or something.
More secure.
So they'd sound a horn and everybody'd run over there and stay, 30 minutes or 2 hours?
Until they told us to come out.
Could it be days or just?
No, it was a matter of probably minutes, 30, 40 minutes. Because what happened when the Scuds were being fired at us, the Patriots were being firing to knock them out of the air. Mm-hmm. And so if you got hit, it was generally going to be because of shrapnel from the explosion. We had some folks got hit, but it was because of shrapnel.
Oh, that would be another level of danger, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Get a piece of hot lead in your eye or something.
Or whatever that was, yeah. And we were worried too. There was the threat that when they fired the Scuds at us, was there a chemical involved in that? So that was always part of the threat, or biological issues, not just the explosion, but what was downrange from all that.
Oh yeah, that would have had to. You'd have to be thinking about that.
And we had people that would go out and test that sort of thing.
Like text for what is that stuff they put in people's mail now? Anthrax or something. They could put anthrax in it.
Yeah. And it wasn't that big of a threat because of the atmosphere, because of, like I said, the wind's blowing all the time, so it's going to dissipate after a while. But if you're, within 100 yards or so of that thing, it
and
could be
downwind.
Yeah.
Well, there's everything so complicated, isn't it?
Yeah.
One day they'll be just fighting with drones, and the drone will come down and you'll say, "Oh, better move."
Yeah. I'll be out of luck because I don't know how to play video games.
I don't either. Well, they'll probably just do it with your mind. Probably just move it with your mind. You don't have any PTSD over that, do you? You weren't that bad, right? Or you ever wake up with it?
I've not discussed that with a lot of folks, but I still go to counseling with the VA.
You ever wake up with nightmares thinking you're still there?
in a long time. Yeah,
But you did.
yeah.
What can the counselor tell you?
Well, you know, I have to say it's probably different for different folks, and how you respond to things, and I think the counseling that I go to now is just follow up with that and that kind of stuff. But I'm not so sure as much telling you as just listening to you and getting through it.
Are they just wanting to solidify what you think will help you? Because if you're looking at it from a religious standpoint, would they look at it from that way? Or if you're a different type of guy and you're just say, well, I survived, and they try to validate what you're saying? Or
Yeah, I'm not that's way out of my expertise, because me being a believer has obviously been a plus for me, and
getting over it?
And I don't know, you know, you and I talked about this before. I don't know how people deal with things if you're not a believer.
Some say it's liberating. They feel liberated that they don't have to worry about it, but I feel liberated too. So, you know,
Yeah.
they say there's no atheist in the foxhole.
Well, I think there's some truth to that. At least my experience has been that everybody, when you're being shot at, really thinks there's a God and is thankful there's a God.
And they're praying to him.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about that in Sunday school this morning, not that directly, but I just remember one of the scriptures that came to mind during some of those times was the 23rd Psalm. It's the one that, you know, you as a child, you probably had to memorize, you know, and so those things come to you, I think, if you're a believer at the right time.
What is 23rd Psalm?
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pasture. You remember.
Yeah, that's a famous one, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Was it David that said that, wrote Psalms?
That's who they should think, yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I'm talking about a character.
Oh, he had issues, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was a terrorist at one time. You know, he was staying in the a sworn enemy's territory. Let him stay in there, and he would leave and go attack other people and bring the plunder out. And he was a terrorist.
Was it him that they caught urinating in the cave and Saul didn't kill him, or vice versa?
It was a vice versa. Yeah,
Yeah.
He was hiding in there, and Saul urinated, and yeah. Of course, then
God wouldn't let Saul bother David, would he? For some reason, he kept escaping him, even with all David's problems.
I think he was a good terrorist.
Yeah,
That was during his terrorist times.
yeah.
You know, it depends on who you are and what side you're on, whether you're a terrorist or a patriot.
It just
you know.
Eddie Cartwright says depends on if you're pitching or catching.
Exactly.
That's true with so much stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. And then he, you know, he becomes king, and he sleeps with the other guy's wife. It was Willie was one of his top guys, and then
Sends him to the front
he had
line.
them killed. Yeah.
Then the God takes the baby.
Yeah.
You know at the end of that, he says, after he died, he said, well, if he can't come to me, at least I can go to him. In other words, that's where a lot of people get the proof that we will know as we have known after we're dead. Because he said, if he can't come to me, at least I can go to him.
I always think about the end of David's life, how ironic it was. Because if you read the end of David's life, it says in there that they got a young virgin to go sleep with him to keep him warm because he was cold.
Yeah.
But he did not have relations with her. And I thought, how many women did he had relations with, and that was probably just a big punishment. But he was sitting with this young virgin.
Well, he was what,
couldn't-
100 years old then or
whatever how
something?
old he was, but
Yeah.
he couldn't do it anymore.
No,
You know?
but he was just. It said to keep him warm is what it
Yeah,
said.
but
didn't
and
it?
it also made the point of saying that he did not have a relationship with her. I thought, well, that's just sort of
Yeah, that was obvious. Yeah.
sort of poetic
Yeah.
justice, maybe.
Yeah, that was poetic justice,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
David had how many wives? 700 wives or something like that?
No, that was Solomon, but David had quite a few.
Well, could you imagine 700 wives? Tell me he wasn't crazy?
Well, he was going to war all the time.
I can see why he had so many problems. But
That was a
what
good-
else? What else is going on? You don't get much into Cleveland. Me and you're neither one of us are into Cleveland politics. That's not our thing, is it?
No, I mean, if
I mean, we're not. I could care less.
I'm looking forward to this coming week. I might tell you that I go in the spring and the fall to a place called Count John Knox, up around 10 Mile, Tennessee, up to Kingston. It's a Presbyterian thing, and they have a day camp up there for kids that come out, and I go up there and teach. I'm going to teach an archery class this week.
So we head up there in the morning.
Yeah, I can be there in an hour.
Yeah. In Kingston.
Yeah, it's just south of Kingston, or I guess west of Kingston.
Is that Roane County?
I believe it is.
I believe it's Roane
Yeah.
County. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's a pretty area? You're not far from Nashville if you go that way.
Right,
Go-
it's
you
right
just-
on. It's right on 40.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that where Sergeant Carter's buried? Remember him?
No, it was York.
And Sergeant Carter.
I don't know about Sergeant Carter.
Yeah, he's buried on Dixon, Tennessee, I believe.
Well, Dixon's the other side of Nashville.
Maybe it's this side of Dixon. Speaking of that, David Crockett, isn't he? Was he from Tennessee?
Well, I
Or his
guess.
wife? Or his wife was?
I think he was. I know that. I think he sort of was from the Northeast, but come down this way because there's what is there a road between? It's off I-24 going toward Fayetteville.
Yeah, I think that's where
the
his.
Davy Crockett Parkway.
Well,
or
I
something.
think that's where his wife's buried.
Yeah, I know it's the Davy Crockett Parkway.
Do you think that we'll be going down in history books, or is our life just a poof? I mean, we're not going to talk about Davy Crockett in 150 years. They're not going to mention us like they do. They'll still be talking about Davy Crockett,
Yeah.
Patton, David, Solomon, and they won't mention.
Yeah, I doubt
Us.
whether we'll come. I'll leave my book for you.
I mean, and if we don't pay the Wix thing, then this video will go off, won't it, Gwen?
Well, you
have
got
to-
all this video stuff going on, so that may be around.
Yeah, if somebody's paying the fee, you have to pay to keep it up online.
Oh, really?
Like a website and stuff. I forget Wix or something like that. It's more complicated than you'd think. It's really complicated.
I'm glad you're doing it.
Well, I'm hoping that it's preserving some of the history of Cleveland. I'd like to get a good UFO guy on here if I could think of one. You don't know of anyone, do you?
No.
I need some nuts. We don't have any. I'm running out of nuts.
I don't know, no, but there was somebody I was going to mention to you that you might want to hear. Who was it?
I need a good UFO guy.
Well, I don't know any of
I
those.
mean, or
folks.
Bigfoot.
I got a picture of me with an alien.
Was it a real alien?
No.
Was you in Nevada,
New Mexico.
New Mexico?
Yeah.
Did you go to Roswell?
No, I didn't. But did you ever see the movie Contact? You know that large array of that's for real. I went out there and visited that. I took pictures of that. That's the National Radiological something. It's they got these huge satellites. They're spread out as far as 8 or 10 counties, and their whole function in life is to listen to what's out there in space. Jodie Foster was in it.
Yeah, what do they call that? SETI?
What?
SETI?
It was the place was called a very large array. And I didn't think it was real. I seen the movie years ago. I thought, what? But this.
I think they heard one. All of that's because they heard one, I believe.
I don't know. I thought, man, I thought this was a lot of money being spent for that, and I guess it's good. Yeah.
Boy, there's a lot of stuff out there on UFOs.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably real.
I talked to one guy that Soroco, New Mexico, and he said they had sightings out there, and he was supposed to have seen one. And he tell me he seemed a bit bizarre to me, but, you know.
Well, you know, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people out there that seen stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you can go real deep into that stuff.
I'll show you me and
I sort of believe there are.
Here's me and the aliens out there in
You look like Gwen there. Look, Gwen. Hey, look. I went to the alien end.
Let me show you those satellites. A satellite thing's fascinating. I thought I went to. Oh, there's the aliens.
Yeah, little green men. I went to the alien end in Area 50. I went to Area 51.
We didn't get down that far. Where are these satellites? Those satellites just amazed me. Where I guess they're.
I was thinking it was called SETI, but that I may be thinking of one of that of one satellite. So they're all just trying to listen for stuff out there.
And there's a bunch of them, and they'll move them around. They got them on tracks where they can move them because they're huge. It's bigger than his house. These things are.
Well, I wonder if there's a website where you can go and know if they've heard anything.
I'm sure there are.
If you could think of the name of the place.
I got it here. I'll show it to you in a minute. Figure it out. There's one of those satellite things.
Wow. Look
It's
how
huge.
big that is, Gwen.
It's huge.
You'd have to have several transfer trucks just to get these pieces over there.
Well, they try. And they're built, I guess, out there, but I don't. They're on train tracks that just for them.
Hey, have you seen the Guidestones from Georgia? You heard of them?
Mm-mm.
You're not much into conspiracy theorists like I am.
That's it right there. National Radio. That's the place.
Oh, National Radio Astronomy Observatory. I bet Doge will get that. National. Oh, but you don't have the field of National Radio Astronomy
You can
Observatory.
Google that and you'll
I
figure
think
it out.
maybe that's self-funded by an individual. Maybe.
I think it's got some federal funding.
Yeah.
But it's not all. Yeah.
Well, if they don't get rid of it, then you know there's something to it.
Yeah. There's so I can see the name of this place. My oldest daughter, teaches. She's, all the maps that we have now. That they're they're changing the maps to where they can be up in the cloud. And you get these satellite imagery, and they compare the satellite imagery of whatever the geography is to whatever the map says at the courthouse. And it ain't always the same.
Never.
And
Well, yeah. They say that at the bottom. They'll say this is not
But
the
they're
same.
getting that, and my daughter's into that. That's what she does. She works with these maps that are.
I think eventually they'll do surveys like that.
Well, she teaches classes on that, and so we were.
GIS.
Yeah. That's exactly
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
She teaches classes on that, and teaches all over the country. We were at New Mexico State, which is in Sororico, and she was teaching the class, and I just went with her. So she's in there teaching all day. I'm driving around, and I find this satellites.
Yeah.
It's in the middle of nowhere.
So, boy, that is really, see, like the assessor of property, eventually they'll get the maps where they're, of course, that's going to be hard to do, really, because there's a lot of the lines are not, even the neighbors can't agree. So
Yeah. That's where they're coming in at, and you're right. It's taxes, and it's more difficult in the eastern part of the United States than in the west, because out there it's flat. So it's pretty easy to
yeah,
figure
here we
that
got the
out.
curvature,
Yeah.
and they'll say some of the calls they call them. They'll say as long as it takes. I saw one that says you walk a full cigarette length. However long it took you to smoke a cigarette is how far the distance was.
Well, I come across one years ago when I was practicing law in Lebanon, did a title search, and the meets and bounds description went to a Indian oak tree. Do you know what an Indian oak tree is?
No.
I didn't either. An Indian oak tree was simply an oak tree that the Native Americans would have used, and they would have bent it down and tied it down to show directions.
Oh.
And then it ended up growing in there. You might see them.
Growing in that direction.
And so it was an oak, and therefore
A bent oak.
They called it an Indian oak tree because it was what the Indians used to show direction. I had to go research that issue. I didn't know what it was. It's interesting.
Well, I don't know. It seems like there'd be a lot of land disputes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, the other thing that's interesting, and because my daughter, she's been doing this for years now, she actually started out working for the state, and then she's got her own company.
With the mapping, the state mapping?
Yeah, the comptroller's office.
A comptroller, yeah.
And but she's gotten her own company now that does this stuff, and she works for a lot of the counties.
So she owns her own company?
Yeah. But
Like that's called Patriot, isn't it? What's the name of her company?
I don't know. I got her card somewhere, but it's not Patriot.
I bet they got their own website and all.
She does.
Yeah.
I don't think it's.
Maybe Stanley uses her.
Now Stanley is. It's interesting because Stanley is one of the few, maybe the only rural county in the state that has his own GIS certified mapper.
He got Wayne.
I don't know who it is.
Yeah, he's smart.
Now the metropolitan area like Nashville and Memphis and Knoxville, they all have that, but most of the rural counties don't have that, and so she does contract work for rural counties.
Oh, yeah. Like for Polk County or McMinn or something.
Used to do McMinn, yeah. But I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, it'd get mind-boggling, wouldn't it?
Oh, I was going to tell you what's funny is that she told me that she says they did whatever she did, and they got a satellite view of this piece of property, and for the tax assessors in some county, and so the tax assessor's map doesn't show any buildings on this thing. So they got a view of it from the satellite. Well, there's some building out, so they go drive out there. There's a mansion on there. They built a mansion. Ain't nobody paying taxes on it because they ain't told the tax assessors off. They got.
Well, yeah, and that's fairly common.
That's apparently so.
And you have to get a
I
building.
told Rachel, I mean, you need to go armed out there. You get shot.
Yeah, but you have to get a power. In order to get power, you have to have an electric permit. In order to get electric permit, you have to have a septic permit or sewer, and in order to get that, you have to have a building permit. So they pretty well got it locked up.
You think about that. If you got that kind of money, you got your own generators, You got your
That's
own,
very true.
you know?
And then maybe you shouldn't be taxed.
I don't know.
I think they'll do away with all taxes and it just be a consumption tax. If you want to buy something, you pay the tax. If you don't pay the tax, don't buy nothing.
Okay, well, who's going to pay for the military? Who's going to pay the police?
They'll just be expensive. It'll just be expensive sales tax.
Well, there's got to be tax to pay for that stuff.
Yeah, it'd have to be
Yeah.
a sales tax. If
Yeah.
I don't buy much, I don't need much.
You still want the police, and you want the ambulance, and you want the roads.
Well, it might get to the point where this cup is 10 cents, but it's 15 cents. But just no other. If I don't have any money, then I don't buy it. I don't have to.
It's funny. I just had this. My granddaughter, 16, got her a part-time job, and so she comes to me the other day and she says, "Granddad, how come they taking this money out of my check?" And I get the same
Yeah.
stuff to hers about taxes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll get some back.
Yeah, I ain't counting on that.
It's not. I would doubt it, and it won't be much. So, what else you got going? You got any big hikes coming up?
No. This next 2 months, I'm going to spend a lot of time at the camp. I'll take some of these kids on a hike on a ecology discussion, that kind of stuff. But now April and May, I'm pretty much working out there part time and still teaching my Sunday school class, and still got a couple clients I'm trying to work with, and we've got a trial set in summer on one of them, and then the next one's is a trial set next January.
Well, that's a long time off, and somebody's got to worry till then.
Yeah.
That's like Franz Kafka.
Yeah. Apparently, I think you've had Stephen Hatchett on here before. I was talking with him week before last, because he's handling one of the cases that I got. We're opposing each other, and he was telling me that the docket is so messed up, it's so backed up, that they're just working night and day. And that was one reason this one case is set off till January, because we know it's going to go to trial, but there aren't any trial dates. They're just all full.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and that's one thing he was wanting to clean out. He was always opposed to somebody being left in limbo. He thought that was an injustice in itself. He's a really good guy.
Yeah, well, Steve and I worked together.
Oh, did you?
He was an assistant when I was assistant under Steve Bev.
Yeah, I like Stephen.
Yeah.
You got to say that.
Well, we worked together here, and then the last 4 years, I got sent to Athens, so I didn't get to work with him that much. But we were in the same office, but just different.
And then he went to Athens to be a lawyer.
Yeah. When
he's from.
He's from. What is that?
Greasy Creek? No.
Something Creek.
Don't tell me. It's close to
It's between Tellico and Farner.
It's between here and Farner, right?
Well, you know where Tellico is.
Yeah, but he's on Highway 68, maybe.
Yeah, well, whatever.
What's the name of that?
Whatever.
Coker Creek.
Coker Creek. Right.
Coker Creek.
Yeah. But it's that. It's actually the first Sweetwater exit. Is that 68?
Yeah, but
That'll
I think
go straight up through there and all the way over to Polk County.
Right, but I think he lived. You know where that convenience store is? Before you go to Chilhowie, you go up towards 64, take a left on 68, and there's a convenience store on the right. I think that's where he was bused to Tellico School. His bus route
I know
was
where
like
Coker Creek is. I've been past there a lot back when I was up in those mountains.
That's a nice place, isn't it?
I enjoyed it. I liked the folks, and it was kind of like we may not agree on stuff, but if I was candid with them and honest with them, they'd be right candid back at me. But they weren't. It was,
they're not going to be mad.
Yeah.
No, that's further down the hill.
Yeah.
They would. Boy, I got stopped riding bicycle Thursday. Some guy stopped and blew the horn, and boy, we got on him. We was on him hot and heavy. He didn't know what was going on. He couldn't even get him. I was.
Where were you?
Polk County.
Oh.
You know, you got to be stern up there, or they'll, you know.
Yeah, I guess I've hiked every trail up there.
Well, I ride road bikes. We were in the road, and they don't like you being in the road and all that stuff. Anyway.
I remember, we'll forget, some guy riding a bike on the trail, and it's in those trails over behind where the Whitewater Center is on
Yeah.
that in there,
Yeah.
and we were back there, and we'd parked back near Big Frog, and was hiking back, and he come on his bicycle. This is sweating. Right? He said, "You gotta get out of here." I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Man, I just passed a bear back there."
I ride road bikes, so I just got to watch out for traffic.
Yeah.
I don't do the hills and stuff. I just ride the roads.
Yeah.
But anyway, everything else good?
Yeah, I was telling him the medication that I'm on for the arthritis really seemed to be working, and I'm looking forward to going to Camp John Knox and working with those kids the next 2 months. And
So you're moving a lot better? You feel greased up like you're...
I feel a lot better. Yeah.
How long you been on it?
This is March, probably 3 months.
No side effects that you know of?
No.
What's it got in it?
The doctor said it's a low-dose chemotherapy. He said, "You won't lose your hair." I said, "Well, I'm losing it anyway." And he said, "You know, you should be all right." He said, "It's just real low-dosed." And
You know, that could kill some other cancers that you don't know you got.
yeah, maybe, who knows?
Boy, the next 20 years, we're not going to believe the advancements they make in medical.
I hope you and I both are here to see it.
Oh, I'll be here.
In 20 years.
I'm planning on living to be. I plan on living to be 110 and needing the money because I've got somebody pregnant. Is that a good way
We'll
to
change
end
your name to David. King David over
King
here.
David, that's right. All right, buddy, I appreciate it.
Hey,
I'm going to go
man.
home and eat some pizza.
I
Thank you.